Butch Baccala. He is the National Scouting Director for Prop McGuire, a former national crosschecker for the Cincinnati Reds and the Seattle Mariners. He joined the show, and we're talking about what he sees. We're talking about the hierarchy in scouting, and he provides great insights.
Welcome to another episode of the Baseball Awakening Podcast, where we dive into the raw, unfiltered, unsexy side of player development. Get ready for some knowledge bombs with your host, Geoff Rottmayer.
Welcome to the Baseball Awakening Podcast. I'm Geoff Rottmayer, and I'm sitting here with Butch Baccala. Butch, how are you, sir?
I'm really good. Thank you. Thanks for having me on here.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for coming on. Butch, you're a guy who spent a lot of time in the game of baseball, and mainly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but mainly as a scout. And I'm looking forward to learning from you today. But can we first kind of share your story and then how you became a scout?
Absolutely. I always dreamed of being a major league player, and playing through high school, went to college, played summer teams, and was drafted by the Philadelphia Phillies. I think it was in either the 10th or 12th round. And then I signed. I got hurt right away. I had some supraspinatus and infraspinatus problems, and then I went from a guy that was I was a starter type. I threw up to 93, 94, and I wanted the ball. And when I got on the mound, I was trying to go 9, and I went from a guy that could throw 8 or 9 a game down to 1 or 2, and just could not. I was having nerve problems down my arm. Had surgery. Wasn't getting better, and then they did a dye test in my neck, and the dye went into my brain, and I had a grand mal seizure. Yeah, I was in intensive care for 3 days.
Wow.
And once I got out of that, I just said, you know what? Maybe it's time to look at something else here, because I knew I wanted a family. I wanted to be married, have kids, and experience that also.
Cool. So yep.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
So I actually coached in at Santa Rosa Junior College. I was a pitching coach there. And my first summer there, I met a guy named Jim Fleming, who ended up being assistant to the general manager in Miami for the Marlins. He was at the University of Oklahoma as their hitting coach, and just a really, really talented guy. I met him through my mentor and coach at San Francisco State named Orrin Freeman. And I went up to Alaska and coached with Flem, and we ended up winning the national championship.
Nice.
Yeah, so we went to Wichita and won that whole tournament. We beat the Gold Panthers, and we were the Matsu Miners. We ended up winning that thing. So then I was lucky enough to meet a guy named Steve McFarland, who is a scout now. I think he scouts with the Cubs down in the Arizona area, but he was the head to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And he offered me the pitching coach's job at Cal Poly, which I took. And then I was there for 2 months. And then a really well-known scout named Roger Youngward, who signed Kevin Mitchell, Darryl Strawberry, to name a few of his guys. I want to say he signed Billy Beane too.
Nice.
So he was with the Mets, and then he got the scouting director's job with the Mariners, and he offered me a dual job as a scout in Northern California and the pitching coach in the Northwest League.
Nice.
So, I left Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, which, obviously you've been there. It's an unbelievable place right on the water. There's a place called Pismo Beach right there. Spent a lot of time down there doing a lot of baseball stuff, actually. Sitting on the beach, writing a lot of baseball stuff and hopefully, deciding where my future was going to go. But then I got the scouting job and, I was on my way.
Nice. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What's that process like? You're mainly a college guy. And so obviously as a college coach, you're out there, evaluating and recruiting. So what was the transition like to becoming a scout in terms of evaluating players?
I'm in all honesty, I think you're learning the first 3 years you're doing it.
Yeah.
But you're writing reports, you're evaluating guys, you're trying to put guys in roles, you're trying to project, you're trying to know what bodies to do, you're trying to know skills are going to improve. But you're kind of, in all honesty, you're really kind of blind the first 3 years while you're learning how to write reports, while you're learning your area, while you're learning where you want to do trial camps. Like, I was how could I say this right? I was a guy that was going to try to turn over every stone that I heard about. So when I first started scouting in the Northwest, I did 25 tryout camps during the summer. Nice. And it was just like, the guys in my area were like, "Are you crazy?" and I mean, it was crazy, but what it did, and it taught me, is there is no substitute for hard work. Obviously, you can be smart, you can work smart, but the harder you work, the better chance you had at finding really good players.
Nice.
And what I learned more than anything was it taught me to start building relationships. And, as scouts, everybody does it differently. I would say the way that I decided to go on the scouting side is I was going to make the college coaches and the high school coaches my best friends.
Yeah.
They were going to be my network of people that I talked to get to the players. Now, every scout does it differently. There's a lot of scouts that and try to get the same information so they don't miss anybody.
Right.
I wasn't that guy. I wasn't the guy that was worried about what the other scouts thought. Yeah. I wanted to be the guy that found guys, that hid guys. And I mean, I have some like unbelievable stories. Like I can tell you a story on, I don't know if you remember a guy named Travis Lee.
Mm-hmm.
He went in the first round from San Diego State. I was up in Olympia, Washington, the first day of the season to see these two pitchers. And I'm sitting in the stands minding my own business. And a guy says, he taps down his shoulder, he goes, there's a better player in this town than these two guys. And I looked at him, I said, no, I really didn't know that. Can you kind of direct me in the way I need to go? And the guy says, okay, I know they're over practicing right now. So I leave the game because I had no interest in the two pitchers. And the rest of the scouts are staying there. I get in my car, go over to the other field, and I walk out in the field, and this guy, first 5 swings, hits 3 off the fence and 2 out of the park. And he's using wood. So I'm just like, oh my gosh. These are the stories they tell you about when you,
right.
The great scouting story when you find somebody nobody knows about.
Right.
So I watch him. It's Travis Lee, and I'm talking to his dad. There's one other scout in the area that knows about him, and nobody else knows about him. I mean, because he didn't go to any of the summer showcases that all the scouts see the players in nowadays.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. So what I did was I went and watched him play again. I stayed overnight, went and watched him play the next day. I wrote him up as like a strong prospect. You know, a guy that you would take in the second, third round that would be an everyday player and had a chance to impact your team. And after that, I did not go back and watch him play. I had one of my bird dogs who nobody knew go sit at every one of his games. What he was to do was just to report to me who was there to see him play. Well, I had to have my Crosschecker. I was an area scout then to come in and turn in an evaluation so I could get him in the draft.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to mention my Crosschecker's name, but he calls me. He goes, "There's nobody here. Are you sure this guy can play?" I said, "Number one, I'm positive there's no one there. And you can't see me, but through this phone, I'm doing flips right now because I'm glad there's nobody there. We're gonna get this guy in the draft." You know, I'm thinking, and his stipulation was that he wanted $400,000 out of high school.
Yeah.
You know, he ended up like I forget what he got, like 2.3 million or 3.3 million out of college, but he only wanted 400,000. So I thought it was a great deal.
Yeah.
And my Crosschecker would not write him up.
Oh.
He would. So I call. You know, we get through the season. I see him play in the playoffs at the end. He looks. Travis Lee was tremendous. He was a tremendous high school player, and so we get back to it comes to the day of the draft, and Chuck Lamar, who was the scouting director, was one of the best scouting directors I ever worked for. Just a really, really sharp guy. I mean, he could break him down really quick and do a really good job of breaking him down quick. He ended up being the GM of the Tampa Bay Devil Rays.
Yeah. When
they first started, and he's a brilliant guy. But I called in about the fifth round, and my Crosschecker was going crazy. You know, like I called above him, and I told Chuck, I said, "Please just draft this guy." So we didn't draft him. He ended up being the first high school player ever to go to the Alaska League, and he hit over 400 in the Alaska League as a high school senior. And so the moral of the story is the draft comes the next year. And I'm sitting at home, and it's 5 minutes before the draft, and my phone rings. It's Chuck Lamar. He says, "Do you have any Travis Lees on your list this year?" So I didn't. You know, I mean,
yeah.
When you do this as long as I've done this, and you know, I mean, I'm pops out here now. You know, guys that know me and they tease me, and but as long as you do it, as long as I did, you know, there's so many stories and so many fun stories, and I don't know if there could be a better job in all the world than being a scout, and especially when it's a scout with a winning team.
Yeah,
it's fun.
I bet. You know, it sounds fun, and I know you all have stories that most people in baseball would have wished to have experienced. You know, so with that, you know, Travis Lee would be an example of this saying that if you're good, they will find you. But can we talk a little bit more about that saying? Because a lot of players think that they are better than they really are. And they have this approach of, well, I'm good, they'll find me. And they miss the boat in terms of skill development and self-promotion.
Yeah, it's that what you're saying is absolutely true, and especially with the youth baseball today. I spend a lot of my time. Obviously, I mean, I work for Prospect Wire, but I also spend a lot of time in the Northern California area. I'm really lucky. Rob Bruno, a guy with NorCal Baseball, Lance Franks with Chico Aces, John Zuber with Zoots. I mean, there's tremendous youth baseball here in Northern California. So the exposure in this area for kids is fairly high. They get seen, they get signed, and they commit to these schools. But when you think that you can just go out and play and somebody's going to notice you, I personal opinion, I think Major League Baseball, we could do a better job of identifying and then selecting players. Mm-hmm. Obviously, when there's so much money spent in the Major League draft, Major League ball clubs, want to make the right decision. They have to get their first 3 picks right. That's where the scouting director's job hangs on the balance.
Yeah.
But, there are so many this year. I mean, let's look at the draft this year. More analytics was used, and more college players were drafted. Yeah. You have a better sample. I think what the reason why that happened is you have a better sample size, more consistent sample size in the colleges than you could ever have in the high schools. Like I think you said it on here in the sheet that we talked about. There might be a guy hitting 670 up in South Dakota and doesn't get drafted, and people are like, "Are you kidding me? How could this guy not be drafted?"
Right.
Well, the 670 in South Dakota might mean the fastest pitcher that kid might face is 70 miles an hour.
Right.
So that being said, I would say that you have to find ways. You have to have people that have experience to help you map out how you're going to be seen and noticed, starting in 9th grade.
Yep. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about that? The kid that hit 650 in high school, for the people that are listening, the competition matters, and getting yourself exposed to that matters. And it's not to say that you can't go on and do something, but, with that saying, if you're good, they'll find you. That's kind of a rare exception, with like the guys like the Travis Lee and the Bryce Harper and those type of guys. But even then, there are a lot of pieces to it. And then just going out there and hitting 650 in high school with 70-mile-an-hour pitching.
Yes. No, I think that's what I think happened this year. Major league clubs are starting to have different putting different types of departments together to study and analyze, how they want to do the draft and how much money they're going to spend and what way they can spend money to scout players and, obtain these players so they can be winning players for that organization. It's very hard to do that with high school guys. Like myself, I was lucky enough to get to work for the Paul Snyders of the world, the Chuck Lamars of the world, the Chris Buckleys of the world. These guys were really, really good scouts and good bosses. The Terry Reynolds. But the one thing is all 4 of them did like high school players and would let us draft high school players. And, they were the biggest wild card.
Right.
But when you got a good high school player, he was an all-star too. So you either decided you wanted to take that chance on a guy where you couldn't get as much information. You obviously you try to assemble as much information and as many opinions as possible so that the scouting director can make the right choice. But you have so much more information in college ballparks than you do in high school. And the competition is more similar to major league competition than it is in high school.
Right. And you talked a little bit about, part of it is with the analytics. Can you talk a little bit about, is that something that you see being good for the game and for scouting? What's your thought on the analytics?
My thought is that, I talk to people about this all the time because now I'm with Prospect Wire, and Matt Bosemile, who runs Prospect Wire, has been the guy that started, Scoutcast, Light Scope. He's trying to get as much data as he can to find out about players so that he can help Major League Baseball. They can get the information that he has. Analytics, to me, has always been used. Right. Even when I was a young scout, I checked their averages. I looked at certain statistics that they had, and the guys who were drafted in the Major League Draft all usually had really good stats. If you're going to draft them in the Major League Draft, they should have good stats. You're saying they're going to be a Major League player someday. They should have good stats. But the difference in today's game, analytically wise, is I think there's it's a two-way thing. I think there's the guys that study analytics and understand what the analytics mean, and then there's scouts that scout players, are not afraid to make decisions whether they like a guy or not, and can tell you what that player is going to be in 3 or 4 years. The only thing a scout cannot tell you is how the body's going to change. We're not guys that, know, we know a lot of things, but we don't know that.
Right.
Now, the analytic part of it is that I do a lot of coaching with kids on hitting, especially. Okay. And the launch angle stuff to me is just, it's gone way out of hand.
Right. I agree.
Guys teaching kids how to swing uphill to try to get to a plane of 11 to 14%. They can hit each ball at 11 to 14% launch angle. They're going to hit 800. I don't know how you do that as a coach. How you can get a guy to swing at a certain angle. All pitches change every pitch, but there's so much good information. Spin rates are. Like for me, I love spin rates because it's a form of what you can project from, but it can also tell you if a guy's tired too. So it can help you with injury. It can help you tell you that, hey, look at the spin rates now, and they're not as good as they were when we signed him. He's maybe pitched too many innings and now, or stressful innings, and the workload is starting to back up on him a little. Maybe we need to stop him for a while. Mm-hmm. Or the analytics stuff is really good on telling you that, okay, this guy's getting back into shape, but he's still not in shape. When you take a week off, guys don't realize it. When you take a week off from pitching and then you come right back, you need time to rebuild up your arm strength.
Right.
So it's crazy. I grew up in the Atlanta Braves organization. When we had all those winning seasons. I was lucky to get to work with John Sherholtz and Bobby Cox. Just off the chart people, smart baseball people, and I think what people are going to find out that these groups that are studying arms and throwing are going to find out that there is no stress caused to a player if he throws year round. Right. It can't be stressful. And you say like a Felix Hernandez throws 236 innings and 200 of them are stressful innings. You have to have a period where there's no stress in the innings or in your throws, but there's no reason why you can't touch a baseball every day and throw a baseball.
Right. Yeah,
it'd probably help not having an injury.
Yeah, I agree. So let's go back to when you first started scouting, if I'm a young guy and I'm listening to this conversation and I want to get into scouting, help me understand. What is there? Did they give you a manual and say, "Hey, here are the things that we're looking for and looking at," or is that something that you learned over time? Where did you start to gain the understanding? Because you can go watch a game and watch a kid, and it's kind of overwhelming with all the moving pieces that you have to see. So, where did you start? How did you start about, how did you start figuring out the process that works for you in terms of evaluating a player?
Yeah, I started. I was lucky. I was one of the youngest scouts I think that ever scouted. I started when I was 24,
Nice.
and I was lucky enough to live in an area in Northern California where there was a guy named Lloyd Christopher, and Lloyd Christopher was a former Pacific Coast League player that played AAA, but was way ahead of his time in the thought process for how to develop players and how to see skills and to assess skills that we're going to develop into major league tools. So I was lucky enough to get to spend a lot of time with him, talking baseball, talking hitting. I can remember that he used to, when I first started, he used to tell me there's two boxes players hit in. One's where they stand and one is where they hit in. And what he was telling me is the guys that can hit make contact out in front of the plate.
Yeah.
They don't let the ball get deep.
Right.
And it's amazing the process you go through while you're learning. Now, when you are learning, you are developing your own sense of style, how you're going to write reports, your own how you verbalize things, and how you write them. So I was a writer. My scouting directors used to tell me, they go crazy, go, "Butch, you write. And I mean, can you condense these reports?" And I tell them, no, I can't, because this is how I do it. So I was lucky enough to work with people that let me be who I was.
Nice.
But what I would say today, when you go out and you start scouting, obviously it takes time to develop that style. It takes courage to not just be one of the guys. Go to the park and be your own person, not just because one guy likes a guy. I can remember when I first started scouting, I did not like Jaime Jones, who was a first-round pick down in the San Diego area. He was a long torso, short-legged player.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew because I was a long torso, short-legged player that those type of people end up having lower back problems.
Mm-hmm.
It's just their body structure. And I was just, I could not bite on him. I could not go on him. And I ended up being right. He didn't play into AA and didn't get to the big leagues. And, but there's guys you're wrong on too, because you can get a little stubborn.
Sure.
But as a first year, second year, third year guy, I think if I was to give advice to all the scouts that are trying to get involved now, number one, I would say don't be a know-it-all. You got these great resources that have been around the game. I mean, I got to talk scouting with guys like Eddie Bachman. Dickie Hamlin used to help me a lot. I built a guy named Bob Poole with the Phillies back then. There was just so many guys that wanted to help a young person like me, and show them the ropes and teach them how to do their expenses and how to do maybe a workout if you're going to work out a player. There's so many things you do. Now, today's game is definitely different. The process of it is definitely different. I would say that the area scouts are more like a bird dog now.
Yeah.
Where they're just identifying, and then there's people that come in above them and make the decisions. And they're more responsible for just going into the house, having a gut feel of does this guy really want to sign or would he rather go to college, and knowing if he'll take a certain amount of money or he won't.
Right. And when you talk about guys above you, you've worked your way up into the national Crosschecker status with several teams. Can you talk a little bit about, what that is and maybe what the difference is, and then maybe you can talk a little bit more about the entire hierarchy?
Sure. It starts all at the area scout or area supervisor. Then it runs into Western regional scouting Crosschecker, a Midwest Crosschecker, East Coast Crosschecker, Southeast Crosschecker, Northeast Crosschecker. Every team does it differently, where they have a certain amount of regional Crosscheckers. Now, then you have your national Crosschecker, where there's usually just one or two. And those two, along with the scouting director, will usually make the decisions about the top three guys they draft in the first 3 rounds. Good scouting directors use the entire organization and do it that way. Like I can go see a guy one time, and I'm supposed to make an opinion on a player one time. Well, I had no problem developing that skill, to go in and see a guy, even if he goes 0 for 4, seeing what he can do and making a good report. But the key was always, in my mind, how good of an area scout you had.
Yeah. How
hard the area scout worked, how his evaluation was. There were some guys that I would cross-check for that were the area scouts, and I never thought they were right. Then I would go into some areas, and I knew that I'd see the player, and it was just like almost described exactly what I seen on the report from the area scout about that player. So, there's different levels of skill, obviously, at all areas. When you get to be the national Crosschecker, you're going to see mechanical things and things that don't work a little bit more than the area scout. You want to make sure that your area has all the players on his draft list that can play and that, should be seen. Whereas a national Crosschecker, my job was just, I can still see it to this. Chris Buckley coming up to me when I was with the Reds, and he was the scouting director and I was the national Crosschecker. And he goes, Butch, your entire job is to make sure that I don't screw up on our first 3 picks. That I make the right pick. If you think I'm not going to make the right pick, it's your job to tell me, don't take this guy. Mm-hmm. But it's funny because I think of a pick that 2 picks that I had really big says in when I was with the Reds, and I was the only one in the Reds draft room besides one other guy of 7 of us that wanted Mike Leake. Mm-hmm. Everybody wanted a guy named Alex White that was at North Carolina.
Yeah.
And they were comparing Alex White to John Smoltz. Well, guys, I was with Atlanta when John Smoltz was there. Alex White was no John Smoltz. Okay, so I loved Mike Leake. I was lucky enough to see him get to pitch 3 different games at Arizona State that year. And, I fought for him. I fought for him in the draft room, and we ended up getting him as the number 7 pick, and he's gone out and had a pretty nice career.
Nice.
And the other guy was Zach Cozart. Our area scout liked him and did a really good job on him. and we didn't do a very good job from a regional cross-check standpoint in seeing him early enough, and our guys didn't like him. So I get a call one night. I forget where I was on a Thursday night, and it's Buckley, and he says, "Hey, I need you to get to Tennessee immediately and go watch Zach Cozart for 3 days and tell me if I need to come see him." I went and watched Zach Cozart, and obviously in college, Zach Cozart was a very, very good player. Right. And I told Buckley Sunday night, I said, "You need to get your butt in here now. This guy's the best college shortstop I've seen all year." And we ended up getting him in the second round. Nice. So, and he's become an all-star, and, he's made a lot of money, and he's done a really good job. So your good stories, and then there's your not so good stories of guys that you do like and you don't like. So the national Crosschecker can go in anywhere. The boy Hamilton in Mississippi, we had really mixed reports on him. I went in and saw him, and one of our national guys had done a really nice job on him, but some of our other people did not. You see Hamilton now in the big leagues. Right. There's a player in the majors. And he can steal, run. He still doesn't really hit, which surprises me because I saw him. He was a shortstop in a little high school in Mississippi, and he could, absolutely play shortstop. Tremendous range, had enough arm, and he would hit balls up in the sky and with aluminum bat and like 6'7", 6'8", and then so that you can judge on fly ball length, fly ball height.
Yeah.
So I had a feeling. I wrote in my report that, man, this guy's got a chance to be a lot better hitter than we think he may be. So and he has never become that guy. He's a speed player all the way.
Yeah.
It's the national Crosschecker has his job is he goes in there and he puts the players in line on his list. And I always used to do it two ways. I would do a list 1 through, I would see probably 250 players a year, from January 15th to May 30th. And I would put them all in line, and then I would do a list by position, and then I did my own list of guys that graded out high just by role, just by like, okay, so you go in and see a third baseman, and you're judging all 5 tools, but to me, the best way to scout a player is by scout the position and the best 3 tools for the position. So at first base, you would throw out fielding ability and running ability, so it would be or throwing ability, excuse me. So you would throw out, you would just use for a first baseman his hitting grade, his power grade, and his fielding grade. You'd forget the other 2. And I think that just works best for all the positions, and you get more of there's not many 5-tool players.
Right.
And if you can get 3 tools at one position and they tool out, then you're going to have Mark Teixeira's, those type of players every time.
And so at the Crosschecker, you have scouts that will present players to you. And maybe sometimes it doesn't match what you're seeing versus what they're seeing. What's that conversation like? Is it a kind of a sell me on this type of conversation, or?
No, I never see. Every Crosschecker does it different. Some won't talk. I was the guy that always wanted to talk to our scout about the player that I saw, always, because I felt like we owed it to that area scout. He's working his butt off in his area. He was the first one to have the courage to make a report on that player. And I felt like it was every bit of his right to know how we felt about that player. So I always, when I saw a player, I mean, I had many times when my bosses asked me not to talk about the player to the scout. And in those situations, I would tell the scout, our bosses asked me not to talk to you about the player.
Yeah.
But every other time, I felt it was my job to tell them what I saw, how I projected it, and the comparison, player comparison. I think that's really huge when you're in a scouting staff, that you're able to give a playing comparison to somebody you've seen that was like that player.
Yeah.
So I can remember John Shearholtz telling me after my third year, I was going to get a promotion to a crosschecker, and John Shearholtz told me, he goes, I do not really feel comfortable giving you this promotion because I believe that a scout should scout an area for 10 years to build up an encyclopedia of players that he's seen so that he can compare those to the players he sees in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that right there is one thing that is so true, because it was easy for me after I scouted for 10 years to say, oh man, this guy reminds me of this guy, my third year scouting, back in, and that guy never made it.
Yeah.
He never panned out. The same guy never panned out. Well, I was involved with the signing of Todd Furby. We took Todd in our second pick in the first round. We took Devin Mesoraca, and then we took Todd. And Todd was a real bottom hand armbar swinger. But Todd's first action was back into his body with his elbow so he could get inside balls, where most guys that are armbar guys go around balls when they hit. And I had the experience where I've watched a ton of hitters, so I could see that, where other guys would say, oh, this guy's an armbar hitter,
Yeah.
Well, he's really not an armbar hitter. He hits from an armbar, but he doesn't hit with an armbar. So, there's experience definitely helps. When you see more players, you definitely have a better chance to make better decisions, and you make more mistakes too, because
Sure.
you're seeing more guys, and you instinctively you want to like players.
Right. Let's talk now about, what you see in players. Let's start with the position players. If I'm, what are you looking at? If I'm a young player and I'm listening to this conversation, trying to figure out what I need to work on to get a scout attention. What do you say? What do I need to work on for you to say I got the tool that are worth looking at?
I don't know how a guy works or not until I go to his practice and watch him practice, or go to a workout and watch a workout. Number one, I think you have to look for, I don't think size has anything to do with what you're looking for. Okay? I never believed in size. I've always been a believer in strength.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, guys that are strong play. And there has to be strength in a player's body composition and what he does with his tools. Strength has got to be part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was lucky enough to scout Dustin Pedroia when he was in high school. How could you, obviously Dustin Pedroia was balding in high school.
Right.
Dustin Pedroia was short in high school, but his skills and tools were good, and his playing ability to play the game was a 10. So, there's all kinds of players. There's skilled players, there's tools players, there's raw, there's crude. And usually what happens is as they grow older and they start to get their strengths and their tools become skills played in the game, then those guys are the guys that usually play in the big leagues. obviously I used to look for easiness, how easy a guy could do it. I watched Machado make some of those plays, even though I hated the way he acted in the games, as immature as he was, and selfish as he was. Some of the plays that he made in the game were incredible.
Right.
The body control, the ability to do some things while he was in the air with body action and fluidness. It was crazy. But, in order to play in the middle infield, it all starts with the feet. Guys have to have good footwork, and they have to be able to use their feet in when they're attacking the ball. And usually guys that have good feet, usually it combines with hands. So they usually have good hands, good feet. Arm strength, I was more worried. When you talk about range, I think range is a really overused tool, because when guys do show range, how often are they able to throw guys out? So I was more concerned with players that could make the plays.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted playmakers. I wanted guys that made the routine and didn't make errors. I can remember when I was with Cincinnati and we got Harang from the A's, and Aaron became a very good pitcher with us. But part of Aaron's problem was we had Adam Dunn in left field, and Adam Dunn was a terrible fielder.
Right.
So Adam Dunn would give up probably 2 balls a game that should have been caught, that would have saved the pitcher anywhere from 12 to 25 pitches in a game. And that's what people don't realize is that when teams are out on defense, when people think that, it's just all offense, well, the teams that have the good defense are able to give pitchers the chance to get into that 7th or 8th or 9th inning.
Right.
Because they've made the plays so that they don't have to throw extensive or extended innings.
Yeah, that's a conversation that, I tell people that the people that are anything in the game, the scouts and the coaches, the people that are anything in the game, that are watching the game, they understand the game. So they know that the guy didn't make the play and that you did your job at the pitcher to get the ground ball. You did your job, so you don't have to beat yourself up. So how a player responds matters.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I on my Twitter, I use this handle down at the bottom, #PUP, playing under pressure. And that, in my mind, is a really, really important tool, because a lot of the players that you see all have the same skills. All have tremendous skills, tremendous ability to make contact, to hit the ball hard, to make plays. But how are guys going to react under pressure? Now, I don't buy the bullshit that Kershaw can't perform in the playoffs.
Right.
Kershaw's a tremendous, tremendous player, one of the best left-handed pitchers of all time.
Right.
Just like I will not buy the fact that Mookie Betts had a terrible playoffs this year, World Series. So can I say he can't play? No. The Bryce Harpers of the world, who play with 12 energy on a scale of 10, that get after the game, that play with a certain violence. I saw him in JC before he was signed by the Nationals as the first pick. And if you want to talk about a guy that couldn't catch, he was the guy. He could not catch. He'd close his eyes. He would flinch on swings. He dropped his head. I've never seen a guy that was such a good prospect look as bad defensively as he did behind the plate.
Yeah.
But then again, he'd step in that plate with that shillelagh in his hands, and there was no denying that he was the best hitter that you were going to see.
Yeah.
So, you know, everybody, it's different for everybody, but playing under pressure brings a different, brings a different intangible to the game. And it's so important that when you're trying to obtain players, the best information you can get is about a guy's makeup. Now, 4 years ago, I was working for the Mariners and Jack Zarinzik, and Jack had me I saw Kemp that summer. I saw Cespedes, and a couple other guys. And I sat on Cespedes for 17 days, 17 straight days. And what I can tell you about Cespedes now that I know is that he's a great human being. His teammates love him. And he was actually the leader of the Oakland A's back then. And, you know, when you trade a 3-hole hitter on your team, that 3-hole hitter is usually the backbone of your team.
Right.
You know, he's the grind in the clubhouse. He's the guy on the field that gets it done when it's the most important to get it done. And he's the guy that always comes through with runners in scoring position. And I would have never known that unless I sat on for 17 days and did my research.
Yeah.
You talk to as many people as you can. The radio announcers from each team know the players probably better than anybody. So if you can get to them and they trust you, you can get some unbelievable information. Yes.
So let's say you got a guy that can hit a little bit, and just say he plays third base. He's got quick hands, maybe a strong arm, maybe a slight uppercut swing, and he's got subpar feet. But he's got the abilities. You know, what the thought process with a scout on a guy like that?
Okay, that goes back to the evaluating on the 3 tools that matter the most for that position.
Yeah.
So if he can hit, if he's a third baseman, if he can hit and he's got power and he's got fielding ability, those are the first 3. Okay? Then throwing ability and speed are the last 2. So if he can do the first 3, or he can do 2 of the first 3, and then he has a throwing arm, you know, he's probably a pretty good player that has a chance to play in the big leagues. Now, when you're looking at swing, when you're looking at hard contact, when you're looking at guys that hit with runners in scoring position, all those things, obviously, I mean, you're trying to see what you can see mechanically, how a guy gets his palm when he makes contact, whether he hits with bent elbows, whether he's got great hip action when he hits. I mean, there's so many things, markers that I know I used to look for in hitters. And, you know, the biggest thing is whether they have good eyes and they can see.
Yeah.
You know, some guys, you wonder if they can even see, or if they have a depth perception problem. And there's so many things that go into it, but guys, you know, when guys get to the big leagues, and I don't care who they are, if they're in the big leagues, they're pretty damn good.
Right. What about when you go and you see a guy and he's got a good swing, got quick hands, he can play a little bit, but he doesn't have a clue where his strike zone is, or he doesn't have a game plan or an approach. What goes through the mind of a scout with a guy like that?
So, sorry, being a peanut here. As a scout, I never worried about guys swinging and missing out of strike zone. Never worried about it. I worried about guys that swung and missed in the strike zone, and they wouldn't swing in the strike zone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, plate discipline is huge. Being able to understand your hitting mechanics and being taught, like if a guy is connected in his hitting actions, he's going to hit with bent elbows. So like his hands and arms are going to be in L's when he hits.
Right.
Okay. So when he makes contact, he's usually clearing with his bottom hand, and his top hand is coming to smack the ball. His palm is up. There's bend in his elbows, and his eyes are always in front of his bat. Okay? So, I mean, like for me today, an overused term is let the ball get deep.
Right.
When I hear guys say let the ball get deep, I want to scream and tear whatever little hair I have in my head out.
Right.
Because it's the worst information you could ever give a kid. Let
Right.
the ball get deep.
Right.
I hear him. I don't mind the word travel because the ball's traveling once it leaves the pitcher's hand. But you have to be taught approach in a stance and the reasons why that approach and stance puts you in a position to hit strikes and to let balls go. And at least the coaches can do that with players. Guys that have better strike zone discipline usually see better than others.
Mm-hmm.
And they just make better decisions when they have to make decisions with their eyes in that quicker time they have to make that decision.
Right.
So, trying to think of the guy's name, Torrey Hunter. If you were to watch Torrey Hunter, you would say he's kind of a wild hitter. He's like Vladimir, just let it rip wherever.
Yeah.
Well, Torrey Hunter, anytime you would throw him on the strike zone, he never missed.
Right.
So, when Torrey Hunter would extend his strike zone and swing at balls, he'd kill himself because he was so good in the strike zone.
Yeah.
Never missed. So, different guys in different ways.
Yeah, and so
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
what about confidence? For the people that are listening, can you look at a player and scout confidence?
Yeah. Yes, no doubt. Certain players, okay, for me, when I work with kids and evaluate kids, confidence is number one.
Right.
The kids that have success and are good, they just believe in themselves and they got a swagger that's a little bit different than most.
Right.
It's, it presents itself. You see it immediately.
Right.
And by the way they respond to adults, the way they respond to their teammates, the way they respond to their coach, the way they respond to the umpires. I mean, it's when you're trained and you've watched a lot of players, you see it immediately.
Yeah.
As do you see guys that don't have confidence in themselves. So, confidence is a cure-all. I know the kids that I work with, when they start to get their confidence and they start to turn the corner, and you see them turn the corner and they see themselves turn the corner, it's like an Aladdin world. It's like a whole new world out there.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot that goes into confidence that people don't realize. You've got to work hard. You got to prepare. You got to know thyself. You just got to have a way about you. But there is, the how-to part that seems to be missing because that kids are missing because they're just not taught the how-to part.
I think you're right. what I see nowadays is coaches not able to reach a kid, number one, communication-wise, and then number two, ability to teach.
Mm-hmm.
And these kids are lost.
Yes.
Then you get this guy, a guy that can coach and understands what he's trying to teach. And I'm not a big guy on people buying into what we're doing. I'm a big guy in a coach knowing what he does and players believing in that coach.
Yeah.
And believing in what he's teaching. And I think it's huge when players can be coached. Coaches show them technique, mechanics, and make them better, and then they start to flourish because the belief in themselves grows so quickly.
What's a common flaw that you see nowadays with position players where you just sit there and go, geez, this is killing me, you know, and I see this all the time. You know, what the common flaw?
Okay. Position players, I would say, they don't know how to get sideways.
Yeah. Yep.
In order to throw a ball hard with accuracy, you have to get sideways. And I see people teaching guys that their feet are front, pointing forward.
Yeah.
They turn their bodies that way, and it can't throw. More than anything, a position player, just like a pitcher, has to get sideways before he delivers the ball. And I think we need to do a better job of teaching guys how to stay between their feet when they shuffle and not cross over or backstep. And will help guys stay in a position to be sideways when they throw.
Mm-hmm.
And then for hitters, this is the number one thing I see. And the kids I work with that I change immediately, they have instant results. Bat movement has to stop before the pitch comes to the plate.
Yeah.
If you're to watch guys hit and kids hit, their bats are they're either mixing the butter, their bat head is flying in front of their hands. You can't hit with the barrel head in front of your hands.
Right.
The barrel has to stay behind your hands. Your hands lead the barrel to the ball. So when I see a kid in his preliminary movements and actions, and his hands are moving, people have taught him an inward roll. I would tell you to go watch big leaguers hit, and before the ball comes to the plate, everything comes to a stop. They load through their bodies, they hit with their hands.
Yep.
So that's the biggest thing with hitters I see is hand movement, which is a negative because then guys get between their stride and their hand movement.
And what about pitchers?
Pitchers, I would say a couple things. I don't understand why right-handers pitch on the left-hand side of the rubber and left-handers on the right-hand side of the rubber. I believe in angles. You're pitching the angles to a plate, and you're trying to create angles on a plate. And when a pitcher throws from the complete right-hand side of the rubber to the left-hand side of the rubber, his arm swing is right into the hitter's bat. It drives me crazy. I'm a big believer that you want to create angle so that the ball comes off a player's hip. It's harder to hit a ball coming off your hip than it is to coming into your bat,
Right.
into your body. The other thing with pitchers that really bothers me is we're not developing starting pitchers anymore.
Yeah.
We're building fast throwing, hard throwing 1 to 2 inning pitchers now, and I'm a big believer that if a guy has a delivery, has body field, has athletic ability, you can teach him to be a starting pitcher. And I think we need to do a better job in all of baseball, starting at youth baseball, to help start building starting type pitchers.
Yeah.
That means throwing in the week. On the youth, we do a terrible job in the youth game of having a pitcher pitch on a Saturday, and then he might touch the ball one time the next week and then come back and pitch again the next Saturday. Horrible. We do a horrible job in letting kids throw 3 days in a row. Should never happen.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's things that are we just do a bad job on it. We can really be a lot better at it.
Yeah. Right. What's the thought? You know, seeing guys are throwing harder with max effort throws and even with the swing, you're seeing a lot of max effort, out of control swings. And, you know, we're being sold on that. You know, we're being sold on the power and the velocity is where it's at. And for the most part it is, because they're getting the money at the big league level. So at some point, though, as we see where this is going, this can't be good. There's got to be some balance between being so passive and so aggressive.
I think, you know, you talk about controlled aggressive.
Yeah.
And I talk with my players and the players I scout. I just want to see hand quickness and aggressive myself.
Yeah.
I want to see violence through the plate. I mean, when I say violence, I don't mean body violence or that kind of stuff. I mean, I either want to see wicked movement or just such tremendous bat speed and hip speed that there's a car crash when the balls collided.
Yeah.
And I mean, those things are different. Now, I think when you see a player, when you're watching a player, a pitcher, the first thing I look at is their head. What is their head doing?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, it's either diving, it's either snapping, or it's either still. So the guys with the still heads, they have the chance to be starting type pitchers. They're going to throw more strikes because their head's still. The guy that goes against that whole theory is Max Scherzer. Because Max Scherzer, every time he throws, his head's snapping, and it's almost like he's going to break his neck. Okay, his head's all over the place. He dives. And when I saw him at the University of Missouri, I seen a guy pitch the first inning as dominant as you can pitch, 96, breaking ball, strike zone, nobody touched the ball. After that, I saw a guy that I thought, you know what? This guy's best role in the major leagues may be as a closer. So different guys do it different ways. You know, you watch the Madisons of the world, the Smoltzes of the world, the Glavins. Those guys are just strike throwers, and they can throw strikes whenever they wanted. They can move the ball both sides of the plate. They knew how to change speed. They knew how to change direction. And they just had that feel. I think it's more feel. I don't know how many guys have feel anymore.
Yeah.
Because I think they just see that velocity earns money, so they go out and they're trying to throw 98 to 100. Well, look at the World Series this year. Look at Boston's staff. I mean, incredible arms. It's incredible. When you get above 96 to throw to a hitter, it goes to a different range of guys that can make quality contact on. They can't. It's the numbers. They show you that it's so much smaller of an area. So, you know, drive line, what they're teaching, how to get power, running power, and all those things. I see what they're doing. Do I like it or agree with it? Probably not. I'm a little bit more conventional that I'm a big believer in you practice things that you're going to do in the game. I've still never seen a guy run 16 steps before he throws a baseball to home plate. You know, I understand how it's teaching you how to build power and to teach your arm to move as fast as it can. But my thing would be to ask them also, how many starting pitchers are you guys developing?
Right. Yeah, I see that a lot too, and just think, man, we need more balance. We go from one extreme to the other. But anyways, now you are a national scouting director for Prospect Wire.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that and how that role, if it is any different than what you've been doing?
Yeah, no, I'm lucky enough since I've been out of pro baseball, I got to work for a good group called Program 15 and the New Balance Future Star Series, and now I'm lucky enough to be with Prospect Wire. And Prospect Wire, we do tournaments, we do All-American games, we do Elite 100s. But we're trying to find more ways into the analytical part. The flight scope, the seeing the how far balls are going, the spin rates, and we're trying to develop techniques into seeing from all the data that we're collecting how to project players out of it. It's a whole new world.
Sure.
And it's exciting. It's exciting to be around because now, everybody would call me old school. And, I can write reports with the best of them and I can break down players with the best of them. But I'm at 56 becoming even a better scout because I'm understanding how to balance all this information.
Nice.
What we have to do as an industry is find people that can balance this information and then teach it from an analytical standpoint. That like a hitting coach, where I can take the information that I'm given from these stats and change certain things that I have to change, in order to make this guy a better hitter. Whether it's going to be giving him more launch angle, whether it's going to be teaching him how to get to the strike zone quicker with his hands, whether it's going to be to teach him not to get off the plate too soon, swing and get off the plate too soon. There's so many things in this, in these analytics that we're learning about the player. It's going to be really dependent upon how we put that information to use in the way we teach.
Yeah.
Because it's no good if we don't know how to teach it.
Right. That's the other thing that I think needs more balance. So we're either, all in, whatever the data said, regardless of anything else, or we're totally against it. We're so old school that we don't want anything to do with it. So I think there needs to be balance. I think there's good things for both, but there needs to be balance just like anything else.
Is you're a baseball guy, like I'm a baseball guy, and any information that we can get, it's of help.
Right.
Right? Who doesn't want information? Right. Information helps you learn, makes you better, and it's a place where everybody needs to go. Now, the balance that I think that you're talking about, and I believe it to be the same, is how to directly take the analytics with the ground root scout, the ground floor of the scouting and the information that the scouts give and get to those analytic reports that these guys are just looking at machines and looking at launch angles and ball carry and ball speed and spin rate and all those things. So it's going to be interesting because if I'm a guy that has been a ground root scout guy who totally believes in that, it's old school. So I believe in the scouts.
Yeah.
I believe we have to have scouts, and scouts have to be part of the equation.
Yeah.
But I also see the need for the use of the analytics also.
Sure.
But I see it more from a development than a production standpoint.
Yeah.
different.
Right. So what's the future of scouting?
I think it's changing again myself. I think here in the next 5 years, more people are going to start hiring scouts again.
Yeah.
And going away, not going away from analytics, but understanding that there's something to be seen and said for the scout, seeing it in person, having the gut instincts to say this guy can play or not, and then tying all the other information in so that it's a quality pick. I think it's ridiculous to say college players are more important than high school players, or high school players are more important than college players. I think you need a balance. I think a good organization has a balance of both. And I still totally believe that you will find your star players from high school in the first 3 rounds. I think you should, as scouts, be able to see the Ken Griffey Juniors, the Prince Fielders, the Joey Vottos. I think you should be able to see them and identify them in high school and draft them. And then there's players that just develop later and become studs later. And those are the guys that decide that they believe in themselves. They want an education. They want to get better in college. And then they come out in 3 years, and guess what? They're first-round choices. So I think we can do a good job. And, everything is tied about what's in your farm system. So when you're in a draft room, and you're going to start your draft, you always want to take the best players that you can take.
Right.
But your organization might be so close that one type of a player might get you over the hump. So you have to draft that guy that year. So it might go away from everything you believe in the draft, because the only thing that you should believe in is winning at the big league level. That's all that matters.
Right.
So it changes, and you can. I would say the Boston Red Sox have done a tremendous job and have had tremendous scouting people and people leading their organization, because they're doing a great job of signing and then developing their talent, but also having the money they want to have that you can possibly have, and going out and getting the players to supplement those guys that they do draft.
Very nice. You know what, Bush? I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but if I'm a guy listening to this and I think I want to get into scouting, what advice do you have for that guy?
My first advice would be immediately start going to ballparks every day. Start writing reports on players, going to games, and trying to find a prospect, and then write a report about it. And then getting your resume together, sending it into major league teams, but going to the winter meetings and trying to set up meetings for yourself with the assistant scouting director or the scouting director, or whoever hires the handling of hiring people in your organization, in an organization. But the more people, the more that people see you and identify you as a person, and then you're trying to get a job, the better chance you have at getting that job.
Well, Butch, sir, I've learned a lot. It's been a great conversation. Thank you for your time, and thank you for everything that you just shared with us in this last hour and a half.
I appreciate you calling me and including me in this, and just showing me the respect of a guy that's done this for a long time. And this is really fun. And when you get to be my age, there's no agenda for yourself. I have to admit, when I was young, I wanted to do everything and be everything. And it was an entirely different agenda. But now today, my agenda is it's all about the kids and giving back to the game. Yeah, do I make money teaching kids and stuff? Yes, I do.
Sure.
People are very, very, very nice to me, and when I help their kids, and they want to take care of me. But they also know that when we get to this age, we do have a lot of experience.
Mm-hmm.
My contacts, you have numerous contacts that you can always draw upon, and your agenda is to help a kid get to the next level,
right.
And helping him be a better person, have high character. I mean, I'm big in the John Wooden pyramid of success.
Nice.
And just everything that John Wooden encapsulated. Who wouldn't want to be like John Wooden?
Right.
So
yeah.
I really appreciate your time. This has been fun. Thank you.
I'm Geoff Rottmayer. Thank you for listening to our conversation on the Baseball Awakening podcast. Stay tuned for our recap show tomorrow.